Today, let's dive into the story of an engineer named Sarah. And her experience, which is actually based on a bunch of real-life situations, it really shows you the incredibly high stakes of professional ethics, and how a single choice can end up defining an entire career. We're going to start this story kind of near the end, or at least what feels like the end for Sarah. She's been called before her state engineering board to answer for a possible ethics violation. The night before the hearing, you can just imagine the weight of her entire career pressing down on her.
Just try to put yourself in her shoes for a second. Her professional license, her reputation, everything she has worked so hard for is on the line. Now, she believes she did the right thing, that she acted ethically, but now she's seeing the real consequences of her choices. And she's replaying every single moment that led her to this room.
So yeah, how did a successful, respected engineer end up here, with their entire future in the hands of a licensing board? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning.
All right, so let's rewind the clock. Years before this hearing, Sarah's career was just full of promise. And to really get the choice she made, you have to understand the journey she was on, this whole path to becoming a licensed professional.
She was the real deal. A top graduate from a great program, and she'd already passed her Fundamentals of Engineering exam. That's the FE exam. She was well on her way to getting her full license, ready to get out there and design, build, and really shape the world.
Now here's what's so important to understand. Becoming a professional engineer, or a PE, it's so much more than just a fancy title. It is a formal public promise. You're accepting both technical and ethical obligations. And your number one job, it isn't just designing cool stuff. It's protecting the public, period.
And believe me, this is not an easy path. It's tough. You have to graduate from an accredited program, pass that first huge exam, then you got to get 4 years of supervised experience, and after all that, you have to pass a final, super comprehensive exam. Sarah was working her way through all these steps, doing everything by the book.
So it was during this time, right before she was about to take her final PE exam, that Sarah was faced with a choice. And it seemed like a manageable one at the time, but it was the kind of choice that would plant the seed that would later grow into something with totally unforeseen and devastating consequences. Okay, so here's the setup. Sarah's firm gets hired to investigate the structural integrity of an apartment complex. The client makes two things crystal clear. One, he's planning to sell the building, which is full of tenants, as is, and two, the final report has to remain strictly confidential.
So Sarah does her inspection, and structurally, the building's fine. But then she notices something else. Something that's not really her area of expertise, but it's definitely a red flag. The electrical system. She believed it violated city codes and was a serious, serious safety hazard to the people living there.
And right there, that's the dilemma, isn't it? On one hand, she has a very clear duty to her client, who paid her and demanded confidentiality. But on the other hand, she feels this huge responsibility for the safety of the people in that building. You see, this wasn't a simple choice between right and wrong. It was a choice between two competing rights.
This is the engineer's dilemma in a nutshell. It's this constant balancing act, this tug of war between what you owe your client and what you owe your profession's binding code of ethics. And for Sarah, a young engineer trying to prove herself, the weight of that decision must have felt absolutely immense.
So, what did she do? Well, she tried to find a middle ground, a compromise. She told her client about the problem directly, verbally, and really urged him to do something about it. Then, in her official report, which her supervisor signed off on, she made what the case file calls an oblique reference to the electrical issues. Kind of vague, right? She was hoping this would be enough to cover her while still respecting the client's request for confidentiality.
But it wasn't enough. Not even close. The client? He did absolutely nothing. Ignored her warning completely. He didn't tell the residents, and he didn't tell the person buying the building. The danger was still there, just ticking away. And Sarah, feeling like she'd done what she could, moved on to other projects, trying to push that nagging worry to the back of her mind.
You know how these things go, right? Some things just don't stay buried in the past. Years went by, and that early career choice, that quiet little compromise, was about to come roaring back in the most public and tragic way you can imagine.
By this time, Sarah had her PE license. Her career had totally taken off. She was a principal in her firm, highly respected. Her colleagues were even encouraging her to run for city council. Life was good. That old apartment project was just a distant, faded memory.
And then, just as her campaign was getting started, the news broke.
A fire had torn through that exact same apartment complex, and people were seriously injured. As she's reading the headlines, you can imagine this cold dread just washing over her. And sure enough, during the investigation, they dig up her old confidential report. The cause of the fire? It was traced directly back to the very same electrical problem she had noted all those years ago. And just like that, her past came roaring back to life.
Which brings us right back to where we started, back to the hearing, back to Sarah, facing that board. The ambitious young engineer is gone, and in her place is a professional who's being forced to confront the true, devastating cost of her compromise. The board's decision would reveal the one rule that you just can never, ever break.
So what did the board decide? Well, they noted that Sarah wasn't actually a licensed PE at the time, so they gave her a formal reprimand. But her old supervisor, the guy who actually signed and sealed that report, he had his license suspended. The board's message couldn't have been clearer. The ultimate failure here was not putting public safety first, above everything else.
And this goes right to the absolute heart of the ASCE Code of Ethics. It says, with zero room for interpretation, engineers, first and foremost, protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's it. That's the prime directive. And this table just illustrates it perfectly. The code sets up a very clear hierarchy of who you're responsible to. And right at the very top, number one priority is society. Your duty to protect the public outweighs your duty to your profession, and it certainly outweighs your duty to clients or employers. Sarah's big mistake was flipping that pyramid upside down. She prioritized her client's confidentiality over the public's safety.
So at the end of the day, the lesson from Sarah's story is it's crystal clear. When your professional duties are pulling you in different directions, your responsibility to protect public health, safety, and welfare is the one unbreakable rule. It trumps everything else, every single time. You know, Sarah's story isn't just for engineers. We all face these kinds of choices between our duty to our clients, our company, our colleagues, and the public good. It's a powerful reminder that those seemingly small compromises can have huge, huge consequences. So it makes you think, and it's worth asking yourself, in your profession, when your duties conflict, what is your unbreakable rule?